Natalia Bonner. Welcome to Let's Stitch a Year of Stars Piecing Edition. And this is block number 3, the Union Star. This star is so much fun to make and I can't wait to share my process. So make sure you do check out our companion workbook. That's the pattern that has all of the detailed step-by-step cutting and marking instructions. You'll need to start with those, and once you get it all cut, then you're ready to start stitching. We'll start out here with a 2 7/8 inch light pink square and a 2 7/8 inch blue square. We're going to lay those right sides together. Now in my cutting, I did go through and I have marked a diagonal line through the center of that block. Now I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch on each side of that block. We're actually going to repeat this process and make several of these blocks. We're actually going to make a total of 8 of those. So I am going to chain piece those today. So sew one side, and then I'm going to continue through my whole stack, 4 of those to be exact. Now we're also going to repeat that same process using our warm pink and our light pink. So because they're the same size, basically the same block, I'm going to continue chain piecing those as well. Now that I've stitched all the way down one side of those, let's cut those apart and then stitch along the opposite side of that marked line. Now you can pick up many of the notions that I'm using here, like I mentioned, including the workbook, over on our website, which is pieceandquilt.com. As you can see here, I am stitching using a pretty scant 1/4 inch. I like to, with a block like this, I like to square them up. So I'll sew using a pretty scant 1/4 inch and then square it up afterwards. All right, let's cut those apart. After we've cut these apart, then we're going to go through using our rotary cutter, or you really could use scissors, and cut right along that center marked line. Once I have all of those cut in half, now I'm going to press. Personally, I like to press towards the dark, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm using just a little bit of flatter. I love that stuff. And I like to set my seams and then press towards the dark. After pressing, I should have 8 of these blue and pink half square triangle units. You want to square those up to 2.5 inches. And then I should also have 4 of these pink and pink half square triangle units. Also square those up to 2.5 inches. Moving on, now we're going to make some flying geese units. I'm going to take a pink 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip and also a light pink 2.5 inch square. I'm going to lay that square right on top of the 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip. You can see that I have already gone through and marked my diagonal line. Now, I'm actually going to do several of these, so again, we're going to do a little bit of chain piecing. We're actually going to make 4 units that are just like this, and then we'll make the same 4 units using the light pink background and then the blue or green color as I have here. The same way, we'll sew right along that marked line. Just for my own mind's sake, when I sew like this, I always will sew one side the same so that I don't get confused and I make sure I sew everything correctly. All right, now once we have all of those sewn, now we're going to cut them apart and we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch on the outside of that stitch line. Now we're going to press those. I'm going to press again towards the dark. That's the way that I like to press. So with these, because my pink is actually a little bit darker, I'm going to press towards the flying geese unit on this, towards the center triangle, whereas my other ones I'm going to press towards the outside. Once I've got those all pressed, now I'm going to sew another 2.5 inch square onto the opposite side to complete that flying geese unit. Now, like we did before, I am definitely going to chain piece these. Now, as you look at this one, you're going to notice that there's a little seam through my fabric. I actually made a cutting error, and so I just pieced a little bit of fabric together, pressed it open, and I'm using it. Now, like we did before, we're going to cut those apart, trim 1/4 inch on the outside of that seam, and then press every one of those flying geese units. All right, now we're going to start putting those units together into rows. Let's start with the center row. So I'm going to use my large pink square, and then we're also going to use a flying geese unit for each side, a pink one, and we'll also need one of the blue or green flying geese units for the ends. So to start out, we're actually going to sew 2 of these flying geese units together. We're going to sew these. The end one is going to be facing out, and the inside one will be facing in. So we'll just line those up. Now, if you pressed these, like I mentioned, going towards the pink on the pink one and going towards the green or the blue on that one, these ones, like we did a couple of blocks ago, should just nest right up next to each other. Now you know that I love to chain piece, and we are going to be making 2 of those units. So let's just chain piece those units right now. So we should have 2 units that look like that. Now we're going to take these 2 units and we're going to sew those onto the opposite sides of our center pink square. After we rethread the machine. So now we've sewn one. Now let's sew the other one to the opposite side. Trim that thread, and now I'm actually going to press this unit. When pressing this, I am going to press those outside ones going towards the inside. Using just a little bit of flatter to help me keep my blocks nice and flat. So now we should end up with one center unit that looks like this. We're going to set this aside for just a minute while we work on those outside rows. So when I sew rows like this, I'm going to be making 2 of these rows that are exactly the same. I like to lay my rows out so that I know that I'm not messing anything up. All right, so the first thing on this row, we are going to be sewing 2 half square triangle units together. I like to lay those out, but we're going to make multiples of these. We're actually going to make, let's see, 4 sets of this. So I'm going to chain piece. Now let's clip those apart. At this point, you could go through and press each of those, which I am going to do just so that I can keep things nice and flat. And I actually realized I just sewed 2 of those wrong. All right, okay, I had to unpick a little bit because I sewed wrong. Oh my gosh, it's okay though, it happens. Let's now sew those back together correctly and then we'll press. So as you are sewing these side units onto those center pink flying geese units, if you did press those center pink flying geese units, like I mentioned, towards the dark, then these seams should just nest together so nicely. So first I'll sew the 2 units to one side, open it up, make sure that I've sewn it the correct way, and then I'll sew them to the remaining 2 units to the opposite side to complete those rows. All right, let's press those 2 units. Again, we're going to press pushing this time towards the outside, so away from the flying geese. Now that I have those 2 units complete, we're going to set those aside and let's just finish those top and bottom rows before we'll put this block together. Now, like I mentioned before, for my top and bottom rows, make sure to lay out those blocks, lay them out in a row just so that you know that they're in the correct order. Those flying geese units are so easy to lay going the wrong way or upside down, even the half square triangle units. So personally, for me, I like to lay them out so I know they're going the right way. And even as I lay them out, sometimes I lay them the wrong way. We'll make 2 rows exactly as shown here. So we're going to start out with a gold corner and then a half square triangle unit. So those 2 units together. Now we're going to make 2 of these rows, so I'm definitely back to chain piecing. after those first two, we're going to just continue on and continue sewing as a row. So the next thing I'll do, I'm going to add that flying geese unit on. Continuing on, now we're going to add another half square triangle unit to that row. And now that final corner gold block. Now let's press that row and then we'll be ready to put the block together. Now, when you're pressing rows, if you don't know exactly which way to press them, you can always lay it next to your previous row and make sure you just press the opposite direction because this is an outside row. So with this one, we're going to start on the outside. We'll press towards the center. And we'll continue on pressing towards the center. On both sides of the flying geese unit, we'll press towards the center. So I should have 2 units that look like that. Let's sew these all together. Starting on the outside, I'll sew those first 2 rows together, making sure to chain piece here. And because of the way we press those seams, everything here should line up nice and perfect-ish. But if you want, you can always use pins. I just personally don't. I'm kind of a carefree quilt or piecer when it comes to piecing. So have fun with it. If you choose to use pins, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. Once I have those 2 units pieced together, now I'm going to add those to the outsides of the center unit. One side down, let's add the final side. And there's my block. So we'll finish off that fun block by pressing those seams, and there you have it, an adorable 12-inch quilt block. All right, friends, make sure you share your progress in our online Facebook group called Let's Stitch a Year of Stars. Such a great community. I love seeing your progress, and we have prizes, so make sure you definitely check that out. Have a great day, everybody.